Hi guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Security Space podcast. Today we are joined by Peter Smith, who's the Head of Information Security at IFX Payments, and what we will be discussing is how to integrate GRC and security together. So, before we get into it, Peter, are you right to give the audience a little bit of a background to yourself, if that's okay?
Sure. I've been in security now in tech for 20 years, security for 15 years, and running teams for going on 10, I think now. I've mainly worked with smaller companies where you have less resources, you need to get more done. But I've crossed over to fintech in the last, I'd say 7 years now. And so not only do you have smaller teams, more things to do, but you're heavily regulated. Things need to be done very quickly, and they're always got a new product, a new service you've got to make sure secure as well. So it's very fast-paced. It is enjoyable, and they do have money to spend, unlike some companies I work for that don't want to do anything with the money. So I've been in security a long time. I enjoy it because there are challenges. I enjoy the amount of pressure. I enjoy the number of things you've got to do at once, having to focus and choose which one. And I like working for small companies because you have so many things to do, so many responsibilities. I wouldn't want to do a job where it's very narrow focus, doing the same thing over and over again, for example. Whereas, this seems to be a good fit. So this is the third time now. I've started a fintech with no dedicated security or very low, and building out the function from scratch. So before that, they'd have had someone in that tried their best to do the best way of setting up a server or how to configure a firewall, and generally they'd have done a good job. But they'll be missing the evidence, some of the controls, there'll be inconsistencies, and also that would be their second part of their job. It wouldn't be the focus. Mm-hmm. So you wouldn't expect them to be as good. So I really enjoy it, building from scratch. There was about you were thinking, there is a time when you built the team out, you've got things working better, when it becomes a bit easier, a lot easier. There's a point where the challenge has gone, and that it's much harder to me to maintain my focus, my motivation. It is the exciting new project is the thing, and getting things done is like my motivation. And each time you cross a threshold or a hurdle, or you do a new project, or you fix something, each one of them is enjoyable. But the last company I worked for was 3.5 years. Towards the end, I was doing spreadsheets and presentations to the board. An exco. I had the team doing everything really by the end of that, which left me not as excited and motivated in the role. That's just been the way it has been for me. So.
Absolutely, and look, it's very, very common practice for I think I've seen lots of different things. There's I think there's 3 classifications of a CISO. If you want to divulge that, I think there's 6, but one of them is the fact of look, you can essentially work yourself out of a role because you've come in and you've built up the posture, and therefore it's right, my job is done. I am just keeping the lights on, as a lot of people will say. So it's just time to move on. But cool, no, thank you very much for that, Peter. So. GRC, security.
Yes.
So it's often seen as 2 separate entities, 2 separate silos. And it's strange, really. It's even during my times in the recruitment days, it's kind of okay, you've got your policies guys and you've got your technical guys. And it very much was a little bit black and white with that. And does it need to be that way? It's all one industry, or does it need to be that way? And I suppose my first question to you is, what actually is GRC in modern day security?
That's a really good question, actually. So you're right. There are people that have just focused on policies in companies. The bigger the company, the more chance you've got that. People that do governance, risk, and compliance, and a lot of that's due to the fact that security employees come from different places. So you'll get people that come in from the technical backgrounds, like I did, and there were people that come in from the GRC side of governance and compliance who want a different challenge. And very often I've found I've worked for a few companies now, as I've mentioned, but often I found there's no connection between the policies and what the people are doing. And there's not. In many ways, when I came from networking through server maintenance, Linux servers, and then into security that way, so through firewalls and WAFs and things like that. I thought that's what policies were for. They're to keep the auditor away. The auditor gets his policies, goes away. You don't have to speak to him. And I'd look at them and go, it's too long. These words, this is not what I do.
Yep.
And yeah, and there is quite often, I find a big gap between the two, and the people doing the work don't actually know what is even in the policy sometimes, which is even worse. In answering your question with what is GRC, the governance risk and compliance, you need to assess the risks to the company. You need to make sure the company's risk appetite is going to be achieved. If you need to bring the threat down, or the risk down, then you need to put controls in place to try and reduce it. And that if you're looking at it from that way round, it makes a lot of sense to start at the top, to have a strategy that aligns with the company strategy. So maybe your strategy is you just need to I've just started with IFX. My strategy is to be DORA compliant, which we should be anyway. So DORA compliance, ISO 27001 framework, which is just common sense, and anywhere where there isn't a specific thing in there, so a lot of them will say you need a good login policy, for example. I use the NIST standards. So I mean, they're golden standards for everyone, right? So it makes sense. But yeah, when I started in security, from the other side, when I started running 2 jobs ago, I started implementing. I was the team leader in security, and I was like, emails. There's a threat there. There's a problem with that. So I'd go and do a email project, and I'd do good work on it, but I'd be ignoring everything else. And I don't know if that's what was needed the most, and I wouldn't assess that. I'd just know, yeah, that looks good, and so I did that the first place I worked. The second place, which was Alica Bank, and that grew from 100 people to 700 roles there. They went into profit, and now, they're doing really well now. But I started as one person. I did the exact same thing there. They had nothing. Well, they had some good people that they had done their best. They had good intentions, but they hadn't. Generally you find there's no evidence. So even though they'll be using what they believe is a good security standard for the firewalls, they have no evidence, no checks. There's no way to show they're doing it. Might be inconsistencies. So what I did when I went to Alica, I picked projects and worked on them. So the first thing I did there was Zero Trust, because they had servers in the offices. They had anyone in the office network could get to anywhere in their infrastructure, which is ludicrous, obviously, and that was probably a hangover from another company that helped set them up that had gone. But yeah, I'd take a project. As I built my team out, there'd be specialists in different areas, and I'd do different projects, and we'd do more than one at a time, or I always do more than one at a time, but even more than that. And I think, so originally it was looking at what was wrong, fixing things from the bottom upwards. And then that worked at Alica to a certain extent because they didn't have anything in place on these projects, and there wasn't, being a financial company and regulated and lots of audits and a PRA meeting them every 2 weeks, and it was easier to get funding, so I wouldn't have to go I wouldn't really have to justify that much. Just say, this is the risk, this is how we fix it. I could give them a scale of how much they want to spend on different options, but that was it really there. And then I'd do it individually by project. And it worked out okay for there, but once I realised that I did the first 2 years I spent just knocking out project after project, building my team, but I didn't align with other teams. They didn't really know what we were doing half the time. Sometimes they'd be shocked that something had changed, right? We hadn't gone through. We did change control processes, but most people don't even look at that part anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the difference, the thing that I'm doing now with the new company is go there, do the maturity, the posture assessment, security posture assessment, find out what areas do need to improve. Company risk is fintech. It's always going to be low risk, right? They're never going to say, we can accept high risks. So they're always going to say that until it comes to funding, I guess. But yeah, and then target from the top down, target what areas need to improve, and what controls we could feasibly do with the resources we have now, what would require new systems, what would require more team. And so that's what I've done this time. From the assessment, I've now got cybersecurity strategy, which is I'm presenting to Exco tomorrow, and board will be next month. But they've already signed off some of the projects from it already. Yeah. I mapped out the next 2 years. Now that will change, I'm sure. Right? It's what I want to do now, but there'll be something else. There'll be a priority. There'll be an issue. There'll be something that needs fixing. I went to the CFO and got sign off on the budget for the first year, so I know when I can recruit. I know what projects I can do. I don't have to fight for them at the last minute. And other teams are involved with all of it from the steps. So when I'm doing POCs for security projects, I will get the platform team to have a look. when I'm doing stuff for the code scanning, so SAST and DAST, I'll get developers and engineering teams to come and do the POCs and tell us what they think is good about each one and what needs more work or what, they're going to be using them day in, day out. And in a smaller company, I'm sure it's the same in most places though, it's a shared responsibility model. So platform they'll be fixing everything that's wrong in AWS. As soon as you get the CSPM tool in, and we go, oh, why are there 503 S3 buckets that are sitting on the cloud or whatever it is we find? I'm just exaggerating for the comedy there.
Yeah.
But they'll be fixing it. So getting them involved early on, it works different. And so for me, the GRC is about aligning with the company requirements, the strategy is what leads the policies. So if your strategy is that you want to get ISO 20001 compliant and you want to get DORA compliant and you want, you want to build the framework for the company, then that's how the policy should align. So it builds down from there. So you've got the overarching information security policy and then the individual ones underneath it. And something I didn't know until probably 2 or 3 years ago is how much incident response and DR really, even though it's not something I want to manage, always seems to come under me, or a big part of it seems to come under me. So, because, if you look at the CIA
because you keep going into greenfields, that's why, Peter. You keep going into greenfields.
I know. and yes, I do. And I do like it. I do love it, in fact. And nobody seems to want to do DR anywhere because, but it isn't a glory job. Building the new system, building the new customer-focused product is going to be an exciting job for someone.
Yep.
Testing your servers can be restored. Not so exciting.
Yep.
But there's ways of doing it.
Yeah, so I suppose to come in on that, I suppose I might be way off with this, but I'm going to use the security engineering terminology of this, secure by design methodologies, and that's always put in the context of, developers and security, innovation, risk. It's always talked about in that context. But what's your thoughts of bringing it into this context with what you were saying there about GRC security and how they're sort of interlinked? Do you think if companies were to adopt this secure by design methodology, it's not just talking about the engineering side, it's talking about what you were saying there about the strategy and about the policies. Do you think there's a link there as well?
Yeah, it definitely is, obviously. And security needs to be involved as early as possible, but not just, you need to make sure that other people that aren't in the security team are aware of potential risks. And so when they start looking at new projects, those risks can be considered early on, so you can make sure that you don't go down the wrong path of a project and go, oh, that's not, or where you're left with a choice of pulling out or going live with something that you have to risk accept that could be a problem.
Yeah.
And that comes through. Being involved with the architecture is one thing, and the design phases, that's fine. But making sure, what I did at Alico after being there a while we did threat modelling sessions every quarter where we teach people how to do threat modelling. It didn't matter what team you're on, you could be there. It was important for engineers and developers and architects to look to find out. But and then, so that's a small part of it. But increasing the awareness isn't just about knowing about phishing emails. It's about knowing how your product will interact or could potentially put the company at risk. And that's where GRC comes in. It's literally in the risk, assessing all the risks that you've got. And it isn't ever going to be one team that needs to do that. It needs to be everyone. So getting it embedded. And I found, you don't find many people that intentionally want to do a bad job. Right?
Yep.
They don't sit there going one day, I want to make the most insecure banking system I could make. They don't think that. They just want to do their jobs. So it's hard for them if they find out halfway through or even near the end, they've got to make big changes. But if you're involved, if you can get involved early, if you can get them aware of what things need to be considered, or even if they just come to you beforehand, that's a good start. A good start is to be involved early, but later on you want them to have the knowledge as well. Then it does get incorporated. And you can, that's a common thing that I used to explain. The earlier we find out, the easier it will be to change anything needs, or we can give advice on different ways of doing it. And that's a common thing I used with talking to people. There is a whole, I'm 3 months in the company now. So I had a good 2 months so I could just learn things. Now I'm getting interrupted all the time with people asking questions, which is great, but also very difficult to get things done.
Yes.
But it's great. They want to ask questions and they want to find out, and that, you know, yeah. And you have to. Some of them are interesting. There's a salesperson that wanted to take yesterday. Came up to me. It's a senior salesperson. He just hired a new person, and he wanted to take Excel spreadsheets of all of the customer database.
Yes.
Every month.
I don't like where this is
All of
going, but
it.
okay. Yeah.
And he was going to give them to his new salesperson that had joined his team that knew about something called MySQL.
Okay.
And she was going to build databases on her laptop with the inputs from the customer database so she could automate some reports. And you don't want to say that's really stupid. Why would you want to do that? Or, you know, and she's really excited because, and he was thinking this is really, really good.
Yeah.
Because they haven't got this. They haven't got the data modeling. At the same time they hired me, they've got someone in who's in charge of data.
Yep.
He's got an employee, and he's got a second one they're hiring as well. He's going to build out a data warehouse, but give them the visualizations in the right products for these reports. But at the moment they haven't got it. So this salesperson's come up, the person who's hired to come up with a great idea. And you have to explain, you have to be careful how you explain these things.
Yes.
You don't want to stop people doing their jobs, and you want people to be interested in that. But But
okay.
there are interested there. There's a fine line between being given advice and steering people away from there to being the team that blocks everything and they don't want to talk to you. And you don't want to go the same way. Yeah, you don't want to be the blocker.
Yep.
You don't want to be, oh fuck it, we'll go round. Sorry, I just said
That's right.
forward if it's allowed.
Yep.
Like you don't want to be like people trying to, because then they try and bypass you, or they'll try and do things like this works. I don't know if it's supposed to be done this way, but I'll just do it. They don't tell anyone. You want to be so.
Okay.
But you also want to be able to give accurate advice and say, look, that's not a great way of doing it.
Yeah,
Let's look at another option.
Yeah.
The same way you don't want to go to the board and say we need to do this, or the company will be breached and we'll have no license, or we'll be completely bankrupt by the end of the week. You don't want to throw all. You can give examples of people that have suffered breaches, but it's not. You can't have that your only bargaining tool. You can't have that as the only thing you're going to say. You can't cry wolf every time, right? You can't.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I suppose just to kind of come in on that one is, what do you sort of think? Or so from obviously siloing GRC and security. You're creating some operational blind spots. So what do you sort of think are some of the risks from having two separate entities? And you know, maybe caveat that with a second point to that is, a lot of companies do silo them. Yeah. And why? I suppose so.
I think it's because security gets split. The bigger the company, the more you want teams to be focused on different areas, right?
Like specialist in that,
exactly.
inch wide, mile deep.
Exactly, and you want the people doing the analyst work and the people dealing with the SIEM and alerting to know what they're doing inside out, right?
Yep.
You don't want them also to be writing the project or the policies, because then they're going to stop doing the alerting there. I mean, I think it's just part of getting bigger, but managing that siloing is something you need to consider all the way through. I've seen it go badly. I've seen it go well. I've seen it. I can understand people, like often the platform team in all of the fintechs I've been at, they're often the hardest, like the most work. They have their projects they've got to get done. Everyone's coming to them to do things, no one else can do it. Everyone's like, if there's something broken, they're trying to fix it. They're often very stressed. And what happens very early on, I find, is that a manager will come and go, right, you can't do any work, let's do a ticket, which is fine. There's a difference between. If you're completely siloed to the extent where you have to have a ticket to get a 5-minute chat with someone, then it's not going to work. But I can understand you wouldn't want suddenly to spring a massive project on someone and they didn't know about it. You need to. This stuff needs to be sensitively balanced. You need to be prioritised and all that. So yeah. But what you're saying, the siloing, there are people that are really good at the intricate detail required with writing policies, and then looking at your policy and going, well, those two, they don't. You said one thing here, but the incident response policy, which sits with another team, that says something else, and we need to make that align. And this one is fine for DORA, but we've got a license in Australia now, so we need this to be mentioned. That is a different type of brain than I have.
Yeah.
That's not where I come from, and I'm building ISMS out now, aligned with the things I've said there, which I'm finding that. AI and large language models can help a lot with the detail. So I know what I want to put in there. bullet points, and it will make it into a document.
Yes. Yeah.
And it will also make sure things align. And I can say, can you check that this aligns with incident response or whatever policies I want? And it will do that. So that's helpful. But there's people that are just naturally good at that. So I can see how it is tempting just to completely isolate and silo them. But you need to keep the channels open, the communication channels.
Yeah.
And when I build a policy, or when I've seen successful people write policies or adjust policies, they'll get the teams involved that are doing the work.
Yes.
And so the policy, admittedly, it's high level, doesn't necessarily need to say what systems you need often, but you need a procedure that is going to align.
Yep.
So, yeah, the ones that I've seen do it successfully and make a difference to a company have the people doing the work involved. At least to review it.
Yes. And that's where I wanted to come in on. And it's my viewpoint, obviously it might be because of my former life as in the recruitment space, of skills gaps. And yes, it's all well and good having absolute specialists. It absolutely is, and there is absolutely a place for it. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But when you start to get into managerial positions, and I sort of want to get your line of thought on when you started to get managing teams, because obviously you came from the engineering side, the network side, and I want to see what were your thoughts in them first few weeks where it's like, oh my god, well there's this other side. And I suppose what I'm trying to get down the line of thought of is then teams that have a little bit more of a fluid approach, where the engineers do get hands-on with the GRC side, they have that appreciation to be able to move up the careers ladder into managerial positions, so that they are not, they can be in an interview and actually say like, okay, yeah, I understand that, and I understand how to sit on this table at lunch and speak to my engineers and say I've been there, done that. But you can also be like, cool guys, I'm just going to go sit over here now and speak to these and have a completely separate conversation, which all contributes to the same mission. So I would be in the camp of saying like, look, I think siloing both functions could bottleneck progression up the ladder to the infamous CISO position, and we might become in years to come have that lack of leadership, which is probably needed more so as we start to get into this sort of, I wanted to avoid saying it, but AI age. But yeah, so what's your viewpoint on that?
Yeah, I didn't really consider that personally, but because you're going to miss out. You're not going to have some of the skills that I think would be really important to have, and you at least need to understand the different functions and the roles. Even if you can't, I can't develop code. I've written scripts in my time, but I have an understanding of what errors and you need to have the understanding there, even if you can't do it fully.
Well, take me back to your when you first got that. So obviously you were coming up the network engineering route, and was it Hogarth or Wilson?
The first job I got in tech was a company called SohoNet, which is an ISP for media companies. So film studios, production houses around Soho, which is where and they had dark fibre around there from another company, and they connected them all together because they're moving large files around. You can't do that on ADSL or whatever. Yeah. So, and it was quite a while ago, and most companies would be sitting on like a faster ADSL.
Yeah.
So that was the first guy I worked for, and that was a relatively small company. It was an ISP, but they also used to manage the firewalls for them. They'd manage servers. They'd move storage for them or move things around. They had data centers. This was back in the days where if you wanted another DNS server, you'd have to go and get a server and put it into the rack as well.
Yeah.
It's like even VMware was still coming in.
Okay. Yeah.
So this was a while back, but yeah, taking physical servers to the data center was probably a weekly task for somebody.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
And how did you sort of get that first appreciation for the other side?
I didn't really get that until I started running the teams.
Yeah.
I wasn't a CISO title then, but there wasn't a CISO. The company was, and to be honest, I wasn't acting as a CISO. I was trying to fix all the problems. I was very much like troubleshooting and fixing problems, and I'd do a project because I wanted to fix that problem, and that was it. So I wasn't thinking like a CISO, but yeah, then it's when you have to explain why that's important, or you have to target what the strategy is, and you have to get buy-in, and the board don't care that there's this vulnerability on this server. They want to know what the risk is. They want to know at quantitative array, what's the risk if we do what? If you spend that much, what will it be? How much better will it be?
Yes.
Or that's what they don't necessarily. They don't want to know the details. They very rarely want to know the details, but they want to know what needs to improve and why.
And I've had so many chats recently, and it is all about sort of communicating cyber risk to the boardroom. And part of security getting taken more seriously in these past few years, there's obviously been a combination of things, geopolitics, whatever it might be, geopolitics, or just the fact that everything is becoming more digital, the fact that the AI, obviously cyber, it's getting huge now. And a lot of previous years, we were trying to get the spotlight on the industry, and now that we've got it, but part of what you were saying there is about like, oh, they don't want to hear it. Well, if we redact the thought process down and go from these technical issues, yes, you've got to then communicate it to the strategy, to the policies, so that then that can then open the door to the boardroom. Be like, cool, if we don't abide by that framework and we do get breached, it'll impact this certain cost. And now you're sat down at the table and you say, oh, okay, so you've gone from being a technical risk into the GRC, into the policies, into the cost, and then you're like speaking their language, and then everything is analogies. That's how we all learn, and you just got to speak in people's language. Yeah. So I think we're at danger of
I 100% agree what you said there. It is so. Having the security frameworks, the best practices and regulations makes it a lot easier for me in a fintech than I may be in Hogarth as a marketing company. So and they were trying to undercut everyone else. So their margin was lower than other people's. So the amount of spend is very difficult to do. Yep. So it is easier there. But it is, analogies are the key to get people to understand very technical things.
Yep.
It'd take longer to explain the technical thing than a meeting would be probably.
Yep.
And even then, there's a point when I'm talking to people at different levels or different types of people that are technical, non-technical, you can see sometimes their eyes glaze over. They've gone then. You've lost them because they don't understand it, or they don't know if this is important. It happens to me as well. There'll be finance presentations, they'll be talking about how they do the treasury, and it's not exciting for me. So I'm in the same boat. It's not that I'm saying that they're not good. I'm just saying, so analogies, and it wasn't that they don't care about the vulnerabilities, but they need to understand them in a way that makes sense to them. So, what you said made a lot of sense. Having a framework to call back on is brilliant because it's like best practices, or and it makes a lot of sense. And all the regulators will, like the EBA one is pretty much taken from NIST, the guidelines for tech. They will often they'll take the PRA. They make the PRA is so if you have a bank or building society and some specific investment companies, you are dual regulated, FCA and PRA. I'm not in the current company, but the one before we were. They make you do a questionnaire every year. It is NIST, and they put an extra section on that's got governance at the top. And that's it. And it's literally taken from there. So the fact that they understand, the regulators understand, or have people in there that understand that, and it does stem down to the board and to the exco and to the people that are actually going to be approving the things that you want to do. But it's very helpful. And GRC is, because you do that risk assessment, which I didn't think was important at the start. I thought it's really important to make sure this person doesn't get on my email server, or whatever it was at the time, right? That's really critical. I don't care about anything else at the moment. We're going to fix this. And I do a project after project and do that. But actually, you're not going to stop a dedicated attacker. If they're going to get in, it's probably a mistake someone's made. You can't stop people doing things that are making mistakes, or you can make it less likely. You can help them make it understand not to do it. You can also give them tools that are more secure. But at some point, you're going to have a breach. So you shouldn't be concentrating. You need to reduce the level of risk to the acceptable level for the board and concentrate on that, not trying to make things perfect. That's not going to happen. This is where GRC comes in. Assess the risk. Look where you need to be. Look, these are the controls you want to put to bring it to there, and they'll understand that. They will. I found that there's a simple way to show these are important because of this. And then as I go to companies without a security, like dedicated security team, building out the function, there's often far too many things to do in 1 year. And I always start as my own, then build a team out. So then you do it over 2 years, but then you have to make sure that the right things are targeted in the right order, which will change. There'll be some other reason why it's changed next year, but you need to put that into the goal. And they'll understand. And it is essentially, you can see security as just a money drain thing until it goes wrong. So And if everything's going well, then companies might think, well, why have you got the security? I know people say that.
That's an all other kettle of fish, that one for you.
I know, but I think the GRC helps me ensure that teams align, that people understand what's going on, having policies align with the procedures, and having the people doing the work inform me about policies and what make sure they're involved means they feel like they're part of it. We can make sure the stuff they're doing actually can fit to it. They won't just given a policy, do this, and they just get on with what they're doing. I know it's a cliche that you want to get everyone involved with security, but literally you can. And part of that is through that it addresses different parts of it. The strategy is, or the board have to sign off on the cybersecurity strategy under PRA and FCA rules, and probably and EBA as well. So they have to be involved with that. But that's the point they want to interact with it. Policies might sit with probably the COO or CTO or whoever it is that's got ops resilience responsibility, and they'll delegate it to people like me or whoever it is within their teams that know how to do the technical side. But that's how they're going to interact with it. They won't know the policies inside out, but they'll have to approve them. They'll have to understand them to a certain level. And then, you build it down like that. And the process is you work together with teams to build together. And it really does make a difference. It's the opposite way of looking at things. From top down is how I'm doing it now. But 3 years ago, I wasn't. 3.5 years ago. It's totally changed everything. And it's meant that other teams know what we're doing. We've got a strategy document, we present it, we've got a roadmap, we get buy-in from the top, and it's meant a big difference to how things work. We're not a silo team doing things in the background that's going to, one day you'll find that you can no longer send files or something like that. Actually, there's reasons behind everything, and we're involved with it. And it took me a long time to do that. And then, so going back to the other question about how do people, if you're siloed, get the skills or be able to work their way up? That is, that already, there are CISOs that are not very technical, or not at all technical, I think some of them. And you wouldn't necessarily, and CISO itself, it might be a part of Exco in some companies, but other companies it's not, and it's at different varying levels, and but a lot of people would think the CISO would be sitting in there getting stuck in doing things, but that's not always the case, and not always the best use of your time. If you're working really hard but your team are doing nothing, you're doing a bad job. But I think there is a risk of people not developing the skills they need. If somebody wants to develop further, they're going to want to be involved and learn. That doesn't mean you should make it harder for them to learn. But it's something you can discuss in one-to-ones. You can have people have, like, if they've got goals they want to progress further, it can be part of it. And I haven't studied a company that's got big enough to have siloed GRC teams. And I can imagine they're very different to the guy who likes trying to fix all the vulnerabilities and there's an attack going on that's really exciting and there's someone sitting there writing policies. They're very different. In many ways. The kind of people that want to do those jobs will be different. But I just would try to ensure that they had a lot of conversation. There'd be meetings. There'd be joint things we do together. There wouldn't. When you work on a project, you involve people from other teams. I do that now. But I'd continue doing that. And as a CISO, it's not necessarily, as I said, you don't need to know everything, but you need to understand bits about everything. That's like the CISP is like an inch. It's a mile wide. Inch deep. And that's true. I mean, you don't have to know how to code. You don't have to know any of that stuff, but you need to understand where the threat would be. The risk. So.
Absolutely. And terrific point to finish on. So just want to extend a big thank you, obviously, for today's guest, Peter, for coming on the Security Space podcast and obviously speaking about how we can integrate GRC and obviously GRC into security as well, and how sort of today you kind of need to do both for it to have sort of a proactive backbone to a company's security posture. Appreciate not every company will do that, and companies will still silo it, but today was just a discussion to see what the benefits of integrating the two are. So once again, Peter, thank you very much for coming on the Security Space podcast.
It's good. Thank you very much.
Cheers.